One morning, an email appeared in they thought removing me from the boardroom would erase my name from the deal. What they didn't know was that I had already started writing a different ending. My name is Ava Sterling, and for 2 years I built the merger that was supposed to define my career. Until the morning Martin Hale decided I didn't belong in the picture anymore. The glass walls of the boardroom felt like ice that Tuesday morning. I sat across from Martin Hale, our CEO, watching his mouth move but barely processing the words. Around the table, 10 executives stared at their laptops, their coffee cups, anywhere but at me. Martin's voice was smooth, rehearsed, almost kind. Ava, we've decided to restructure the merger leadership team. Your contributions have been valuable, but we're moving in a different direction. Effective immediately, you're being reassigned. My pulse hammered in my ears. 2 years. I had spent 2 years negotiating between Horizon Analytics and Nexera Systems, building trust, smoothing conflicts, making the impossible deal possible. And now, 3 weeks before signing, I was being cut out. Martin's smirk lingered at the corner of his mouth. This wasn't business. This was personal. I forced my face into something calm, almost serene. Then I stood, smoothed my blazer and said quietly, "Then I guess I'll just build something you can't cut me out of." The room went silent. I walked out without looking back. 6 months earlier, everything had felt different. I remembered the morning Martin called me into his office, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His enthusiasm genuine. "Ava, I need someone I can trust on this merger. Someone who can handle Nexera's CEO without letting ego get in the way." I had smiled, honored. Nexera Systems was a data analytics firm revolutionizing market intelligence. Merging with them would triple our reach, transform Horizon Analytics into a powerhouse. I spent weeks studying their operations, learning their culture, building rapport with their leadership team. I flew to their headquarters in Austin, had dinners with their CFO, late-night calls with their technical leads. By month 3, I wasn't just negotiating a merger. I was the bridge holding both companies together. Their team trusted me. Our investors trusted me. Even Martin seemed impressed. Or so I thought. The CFO, Marcus Kane, pulled me aside one afternoon near the coffee machine. His voice was low, cautious. "Be careful, Ava. Martin's been meeting with Nexera privately. Without you." The warning echoed in my mind for days. I started paying closer attention. Small things shifted. My name disappeared from email threads I had started. Slide decks I created were suddenly credited as team contributions. In meetings, Martin began presenting my strategies as his own insights, nodding thoughtfully as if the ideas had just occurred to him. I told myself I was being paranoid. But then I opened a shared drive one morning and found a document I had never seen before. The file name made my stomach drop. Merger Plan V1 by M. Hale. Clicked it open. Every detail inside was mine. My timeline, my negotiation structure, my risk mitigation strategies. Word for word. Only my name had been replaced with his. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. This wasn't an accident. This was erasure. I took screenshots of everything. Timestamps, version histories, email confirmations. I saved them in a private cloud folder, encrypted and backed up. I didn't know why yet. I just knew I needed proof. 2 weeks later, Martin threw a celebration. The entire office gathered in the main atrium, champagne glasses glinting under string lights. He stood on a small stage, microphone in hand, grinning like a man who had already won. "This merger," he began, voice booming with confidence, "is a triumph of leadership. It's what happens when vision meets execution." The crowd cheered. I stood near the back, clapping politely, my face a mask. Not once did he mention my name. Not once did he acknowledge the hundreds of hours I had poured into making his vision a reality. But across the room I noticed someone watching me. Nexera's Derek Ashford stood by the bar with a puzzled expression. He had worked with me directly for months. He knew who had built this deal. Our eyes met briefly. He raised his glass slightly, a quiet acknowledgement. Later that night my phone buzzed. A text from Derek. We need to talk. Something's off. Inbox. The subject line read, "Please. Can we talk?" It was from Mark. I stared at it for a long moment, my cursor hovering over the delete button. Then I did something better. I forwarded the email to HR with a single line, "For record-keeping purposes." Then I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. I didn't need to respond. I didn't need closure from him. I'd already found it in the work I was doing, in the changes I was making, in the knowledge that I'd stood up when it mattered. Mark had tried to delete the evidence. But integrity can't be erased. Can only be exposed. And once it's out in the open, it changes everything. That afternoon I packed up my things and headed home early. The sun was setting over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. I walked slowly, letting the moment settle over me. Peaceful, powerful, untouchable. Mark had tried to bury me, and for a while I'd believed he could. But he'd underestimated one thing. The truth doesn't disappear just because someone deletes a file. It lives in backups, in timestamps, in the memory of everyone who witnessed it. And when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't just expose the fraud. It reveals who people really are. I'd learned that the hard way. But I'd also learned something else. You don't need revenge when you have the truth. You just need the courage to share it. I whispered to myself as I walked. You don't delete integrity. You just expose it. And I kept walking, leaving the past behind me one step at a time. We met at a coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment. Derek looked tired. His usual confidence replaced with something heavier. He ordered an espresso, then leaned forward, his voice low. Martin's been trying to restructure the signing process. He wants to make himself the sole signatory. He's been lobbying our board to freeze you out of final negotiations. My hands tightened around my cup. Why would he do that? Derek shook his head. Ego. Control. Maybe both. But our team isn't comfortable with it. You're the one who built trust with us. Without you, this deal feels unstable. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not panic. Clarity. Martin wasn't just taking credit. He was rewriting history before it was even finished. I thanked Derek and left the cafe. When I got home, I opened my laptop. A new company memo sat in my inbox. Subject line: Organizational adjustments. My title had been changed. Senior merger strategist was now temporary consultant. Transition phase. They were erasing me in real time. HR called me in the next morning. 2 women sat across from me, their expressions carefully neutral. It's just a transitional decision, one of them said. You'll still be consulted as needed. I nodded, keeping my face calm. Inside I felt hollow. I left the office at noon, walked to my car, and sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, staring at nothing. Home, I finally let myself break. I cried hard, messy tears that left my face swollen. Then I washed my face, made tea, and opened my laptop. I started writing. Every meeting, every email, every moment Martin had taken something I built and stamped his name on it. I documented everything in a personal timeline, complete with evidence. My best friend called that evening. If he's cutting you out, she said gently, maybe it's time to build something he can't touch. Her words stayed with me long after we hung up. That night, I scrolled through old emails, searching for something I half remembered. Then I found it. A proposal I had written 8 months ago, pitching a partnership with Virion Labs, a small ecotech firm developing sustainable data solutions. Martin had rejected it immediately. Too niche, he'd said. Not worth our time. But Virion's founder, Nolan Pierce, had loved the idea. He'd told me if I ever wanted to revisit it, his door was open. I stared at his contact information for a long time. Then I typed a short message. Nolan, remember that partnership idea you liked? I think it's time we revisit it. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. He replied within an hour. Let's talk tomorrow. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked with Virion after hours. Consulting, not employment. Nothing in my contract prohibited it. I offered strategic guidance in exchange for partial equity. Together, we started developing a lean, fast alternative to what Horizon and Nexera were building. Virion's technology was cleaner, more adaptable, and built for companies tired of bloated systems. It could disrupt the exact market Nexera was targeting. Kept it quiet. No announcements, no social media posts. Just steady, focused work. Then one evening my phone rang. Martin. Ava, we need you back. Nexera's getting nervous about the timeline. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Then I said calmly, I'll think about it. He sounded surprised. Think about it. Ava, this is your career. Exactly, I replied and hung up. I agreed to return temporarily. When I walked back into Horizon's office, the atmosphere had shifted. The team looked exhausted, demoralized. Deadlines had been missed. Nexera's leadership was frustrated, sending terse emails and canceling calls. I stepped in quietly, fixing what Martin had broken. I smoothed tensions, clarified timelines, rebuilt trust. I played the loyal professional, calm and composed. But I didn't tell anyone about Virion. One afternoon, Martin leaned against my desk, arms crossed. His voice was low, almost threatening. When this is over, Ava, I'll make sure no one in this industry ever hires you again. I looked up at him, my expression unreadable. We'll see, I said softly. He walked away, confident he'd won. He had no idea what I was building in the shadows. A week later, I stayed late to finish a report. The office was nearly empty, just the hum of computers and distant traffic. I passed Martin's office and heard voices. Him and the senior VP, Kenneth Frame. They were laughing. She actually thought she'd get credit, Kenneth said, voice dripping with amusement. We used her like a mule, Martin replied. Now we don't need her anymore. I stood frozen in the hallway. Then I glanced down. My smartwatch was recording. I had activated the voice memo app earlier by accident. Or maybe not by accident. I kept walking, heart pounding. That evening I saved the audio file, labeling it simply, insurance. I wasn't sure when I'd need it, but I knew I would. Over the next 2 weeks, I planted seeds of doubt. Nothing overt. Just subtle comments during calls with Derek. I'm concerned Martin's leadership style might cause issues long-term, I mentioned once casually. Have you noticed the team morale declining? Derek had noticed. So had others at Nexera. They started asking harder questions during meetings. Requesting documentation Martin couldn't provide. Delaying decisions. Horizon's board grew restless. Investors started sending concerned emails. Martin began unraveling. One afternoon, he stormed into my temporary office, face red. Are you sabotaging me? I looked up calmly. I'm doing my job. If that feels like sabotage, maybe you should examine your leadership. He slammed the door on his way out. That night, I finalized Virion's beta product demo. It was sleek, efficient, and directly competitive with Nexera's offerings. Nolan and I had worked tirelessly, refining every detail. The next morning, Nexera canceled their meeting with Horizon. Indefinitely. Martin's assistant sent a frantic company-wide email requesting an emergency leadership call. I didn't attend. Instead, I sat in a quiet cafe, sipping tea, watching the chaos unfold from a distance. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, confusion and panic spreading. I replied to none of them. Except one. Derek sent a private message. I don't know what's happening, but I trust you. Smiled. Good, I typed back. You should. Martin called an all-hands meeting the following Monday. The entire company crammed into the main conference space, tension crackling in the air. He stood at the front, visibly shaken, trying to regain control. Recent disruptions have been caused by internal disloyalty, he announced, his gaze landing on me. Some people prioritize personal agendas over company success. A few heads turned my direction. I stood up slowly, gathered my bag, and walked toward the exit. No defense, no argument. just quiet departure. By the time I reached my car, my resignation letter was already in Martin's inbox. That evening, Derek emailed me. "If you ever want to talk about future collaborations, I'm listening." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "Let's set up a call." Within 2 weeks, I officially partnered with Virion Labs. We launched quietly, targeting mid-sized companies frustrated with overpriced, complex systems. Our product was smaller, greener, smarter. Word spread fast. A tech journalist covering the Horizon Nexera chaos reached out, asking about innovative independent ventures disrupting the data space. I agreed to an interview. The article published on a Thursday morning. Headline: Ex-Horizon director launches startup that could outsmart big data players. By noon, my inbox was flooded. Investors, potential clients, former colleagues congratulating me. Martin's name appeared nowhere in the article. For the first time in months, I felt light. Horizon's stock dipped after the article. Martin exploded, calling an emergency legal review. He accused me of corporate betrayal, threatened lawsuits, sent aggressive emails through his attorney. But his legal counsel reviewed my actions carefully. I had violated no NDA. I had shared no proprietary material. Virion was built on my original idea, documented and time-stamped before Horizon ever rejected it. Martin's attorney sent a cautious email. My attorney replied simply, "Proceed, and we'll release the recordings." The threats stopped immediately. Martin went silent, but I knew he was panicking. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. Nexera reached out directly. Not to Horizon. Me. Derek called on a Friday afternoon. "Our board has been watching your work with Virion. We're impressed. We'd like to propose a joint partnership with you instead of Horizon." I leaned back in my chair, processing. "Why?" "Because Martin made us uneasy," Derek said honestly. "You made us trust the process. We want to work with someone who leads with integrity." I smiled slowly. "I'll consider it. But on one condition." "Name it." "Full transparency. No hidden agendas. No ego games." Derek laughed. "Done." Horizon's board discovered Nexera's pivot within days. Investors demanded answers. Martin's position became untenable. The board called an emergency vote. He fought desperately to keep his seat, blaming external sabotage, market instability, anything but his own arrogance. But the numbers didn't lie. The merger he'd promised was collapsing. The company's valuation was plummeting. His leadership had failed. Desperate, Martin reached out to me privately. "We need to talk. Please." I stared at his message for a long time. Then I replied, "You made me obsolete, Martin. Now it's your turn." A month later, we both spoke at a major tech summit. Martin arrived looking polished but hollow. He tried to corner me backstage, suggesting a reconciliation narrative for the audience. I listened politely, then walked onto the stage. During my panel, I unveiled Virion's partnership with Nexera, effective immediately. The audience gasped. Cameras flashed. Martin, sitting in the front row, went pale. I didn't look at him. I focused on the crowd, on the future, on everything I'd built from the ashes of his betrayal. Afterward, journalists swarmed me. Martin left through a side exit, alone. Within a week, Horizon's valuation collapsed. Investors pulled funding. Employees began jumping to Virion, sending quiet resumes, asking if we were hiring. Former allies of Martin's distanced themselves, suddenly claiming they'd always supported Ava's vision. The company that once seemed untouchable was crumbling. Then one afternoon, Martin showed up at Virion's office. Unannounced. Security called me. "There's someone here asking for you." I hesitated. Then I nodded. "Let him in." Martin looked smaller somehow. Older. Tired. He sat across from me in the small conference room, hands clasped. "I need your help," he said quietly. "Horizon is dying. If you come back, if we merge Virion back into the company, we can save it." I studied him. No smirk. No arrogance. Just desperation. You taught me something important, Martin, I said finally. Never underestimate quiet people. He flinched. I was wrong. I know that now. Understood. I appreciate the apology. But no. He looked up shocked. You're turning me down. Politely, I said. But yes. I walked him to the door. He left without another word. 2 weeks later the news broke. Horizon Analytics was being acquired for a fraction of its former value. Martin was ousted by the board. His severance package minimal. Journalists dug into his leadership failures. An anonymous source leaked audio recordings of him mocking employees, dismissing concerns, taking credit for others' work. His reputation collapsed overnight. I watched the broadcast from Virion's office, surrounded by my team. Someone asked if I felt vindicated. Thought about it. Then I closed my laptop and smiled. I feel free. Virion and Nexera's partnership dominated the market within 6 months. Our approach, fair, transparent, innovative, earned respect across the industry. I refused interviews about Martin, focusing instead on our mission, our values, our people. One afternoon, a young analyst approached me nervously. I almost quit corporate work entirely, she said. But then I read about you. You're the reason I stayed. Her words meant more than any headline ever could. Martin tried launching a new venture months later. But investors avoided him. Industry insiders whispered. His arrogance had filled boardrooms once. Now he struggled to book meetings. I heard he was consulting independently, taking small contracts trying to rebuild. I didn't follow his career closely. I was too busy building mine. Then one day, a short message appeared in my inbox. I was wrong. Truly. I'm sorry. No excuses. No justifications. Just an apology. I stared at it for a long time. I agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe near the waterfront. He looked different. Humbled. Older. We sat across from each other. The silence heavy but not hostile. I destroyed everything, he said finally. My career, my reputation. I did it to myself. He nodded. You did. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I understand now. I looked out the window, watching boats drift across the harbor. Then I turned back to him. I forgive you, Martin. But I won't forget. He exhaled, relief washing over his face. I stood to leave. The door I paused. You built your empire on ego. I built mine on respect. That's why mine lasted. Outside my phone buzzed. Virion had been invited to a global sustainability summit. The summit hall was massive, filled with innovators, leaders, activists. I stood on stage, looking out at hundreds of faces. Young professionals, entrepreneurs, people building something meaningful. When someone tries to erase your name, I said, my voice steady, write it somewhere they can't reach. Build something so strong, so real, that no one can take it from you. The audience rose in applause. Not for revenge. Not for victory. For resilience. For integrity. For the quiet power of refusing to disappear. As I left the stage, sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, warm and golden. I thought about everything that had led here. The humiliation, the betrayal, the late nights rebuilding from nothing. And I smiled. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it builds quietly, brick by brick, until silence becomes the loudest victory of all.